All right. I think other than that, other than the programming poll, we can go ahead and get started with the informational. So this is for the Scientific Computing Student Club, often abbreviated SC2. And yeah, we're gonna just kind of give you some info on what we're about. We've been currently trying to rebuild the club, and we have a lot of cool new ideas that we're excited to share with you. One important thing up front, we're only planning on meeting once a month, but we are also planning to have a lot of activities in between. Okay. So the main things I would say that we're interested in as SC2 are projects, workshop, events, and community. And we're going to talk, most of this presentation is going to be talking about each one of these things. So if you're like, what are we about? This is what we're about. As far as the events go, this is encompassing a lot of things. But one of the things that we're really excited about is participating in things like hackathons and data challenges. And then the community aspect is just, kind of the typical club thing where you get to meet people who have similar interests as you. So the first thing we're going to talk about is projects. That's the first aspect of the club. So I guess the best way to put this is if you've ever like seen a really cool piece of software and you were like, man, I really wish I knew how that worked, or I want to know more about that. Or if you are reading about some new method related to your research or science in general, you're like, I wonder how hard that would be to implement. I think that this aspect of our club is the perfect chance for you to, I guess, go for. I mean, trying to implement something like that, or trying to program something, or learning more about a program that was already given to you that you use constantly. So up here at the top, I have this, things like you want to develop some new type of program, create a club project. And so what these club projects are going to be essentially is a way for any student, any member of the club to come up and say, hey, I'm really interested in maybe it's like a finite element solver. I want to try to implement this. I want to try to make a simulation library that can create or do this sort of simulation. And then what you would do is you then take that to the club, and then you would advertise it in one of the club meetings, and then we would create this sort of a collaborative project environment where you could work and create this project, and all the other members of the club could work on it too. So that's the general idea. And then we also listed some general rules down here associated with all this, with projects. So like I said, any member can propose a project. However, once that project is proposed and it's acceptable and everything, the person who proposed it is then in charge of making sure it gets completed. So you'll become kind of a project manager. So say you want help from others in the club, then you will be like responsible for like making it possible for them to complete the project. Of course, the project should be relevant to scientific computing research, just because we are a scientific computing club. That's just to say, like, I feel like we'll be pretty lenient on this, but we don't want things like you creating a new e-commerce platform or something like that. Something related to computing, but totally different from research or scientific computing. As a club, we're only planning on having 3 projects at a time ever. This is just to keep, to make sure we actually finish some projects. So if we had like 20 ongoing at one time, and there was one person working on each of them, I feel like it would be much less productive than just having 3 that people can go back and forth between. So any member of the club can work on the project. Once you become a member, you would get access to the collaborative environment, and then you could work on any of the projects. And then we also want to keep these projects relatively short so that, like we said, we can, only having 3 projects, we can go through and actually complete some. So that's kind of a high level overview. And then we also put some examples in here of things that you might consider. So I'm from a structures background, so I have I guess like a sort of solid mechanics type of view on what scientific computing is. So some of the ones I said is you might want to create some sort of special finite element solver for like a particular sort of problem. Machine learning, artificial intelligence is very popular now. So maybe you want to understand how that works more. Maybe implement your own machine learning training algorithm, or maybe just create an app to visualize simulations. And here I want to point out, I was really emphasizing it's an app. You know, it's like less scientific computing related, more like visualization. But I think those types of projects would still be acceptable in the club. I also want to point out that these projects don't have to be anything crazy or novel. It could be something that's been done a million times that you would just think that would be cool to implement. You want to see how the algorithm works for yourself and learn about it. So yeah, it doesn't have to be any sort of crazy project. If you are interested in making one of these projects, we will be having our first club meeting in roughly a month, and that will be a perfect time for you to sort of get your first project idea in, and then be able to present the idea to the club during that first meeting. So we wanted to make sure you guys knew the process before that happened. So the first step would be to make a proposal for the project, and that sounds kind of like a lot of work, but we tried to make it really low effort, very streamlined, just the basics amount of information on what your project is going to be. So then you would send it into the club a week before the first meet, or a week before the meeting that you want to sort of tell the whole club about it. Then in the club meeting, you would advertise it to everyone. This gives you a chance to share your interest in the project and hopefully get others to be as interested in it as you are. And then we would approve the project after you advertised it and send in your proposal. And then we would set up your project in GitHub, and you could assign tasks or create tasks for people to complete. And then you can then from here it's just basically continuing on with a project structure. So you'd accept pull requests, you would become like the project manager, maybe implementing some features on your own, but hopefully getting all the members of the club, or as many as you can, involved in your project, and then complete your project. So like I said, we wanted to make the project proposal as simple as possible. So there's only 4 things that you need to include in your proposal. Now, the first thing is the background. You just need to give us a paragraph or 2 of what it is that you are wanting to program, how long you want it to take. I know estimating a timeline for a project can be very difficult, especially if you've never done it. So just say, you know, I want this to be done in a certain amount of time. It just gives us a good idea of how long you think the project will take. And then 3 example tasks that you could create for others to do, or even for yourself to do, but sort of just so you have an idea of how the project is going to be completed. And then any resources that would be required, such as high performance computing or some sort of I don't know, anything else that would require funding. That's what we would require in the proposal. So what you would give to us is your proposal document and then your project advertisement that you would, this is what you'd be sharing in the club meeting when you want to get other people interested in your project. And we only want this to be a couple of minutes long, so that basically you're just giving everyone the background of the project. And the content of it can be whatever you want. We just ask that you keep it relatively short for the meeting. And here I just wanted to include, this is kind of one of my thoughts of how you could help delegate some of the things in your project. And so here is a GitHub issue, and I'm specifying the work that needs to be done also with enough background. So I think the benefits of this are like twofold. One, you're helping others get interested and involved in this topic that you're interested in. And then 2, going through all the detail of trying to explain what to do to someone else, I think you're really getting a chance to learn the fundamentals of what you're interested in. So, it is, it takes more work than just doing it yourself. But I think, they say teaching is the best way to learn. So that's just an example of how you might delegate. But this is definitely not required. You can, choose to run your project however you see fit. We've also been experimenting with some sort of a point system for the project. So just like something for fun. Maybe at the end of the semester, we can tally up all the scores of people of how our club members have contributed, and maybe just say a few words about some statistics about everyone's points. And so the point system was really made to, I guess, and not enforce, but promote collaboration. So the more collaborative you are in your project, the more points you would get. Okay, so that's it for the projects. Now we're going to move on to workshops and presentations. So I think so. This club is rebooting right now. It was a club before COVID and has since kind of fallen out, and now we're coming back to being a club again. And mostly, I think what this club was before was it was a lot of presenting new research and each other's research and inviting people to come talk. And so we're really trying to retain that and the club structure with these with workshops and presentations. So the idea of the workshops is that we all come from different backgrounds in scientific computing or computing in general, or maybe we're new to scientific computing and we want to learn more. The idea is that each person in the club is going to have some knowledge that other people's don't related to computing. Maybe people have used Julia a lot in for their programming, but aren't very familiar with C and how it works, and maybe they'd want to be interested in. So maybe another person in the club who is familiar with C is going to give a brief rundown about the basics of C. So that's the idea about the workshops. We also want to give space for presentations, and these can be related to your research or research that you've seen that you thought was exciting, and maybe it's by someone else, and also research from experts and faculty in the field. That's really what we're thinking about these presentations. And then finally, we understand that there's topics that don't really fall in either of those categories. So it's not really something that's directly applicable, like a workshop where you can sort of present this brief topic, like the basics of C, and you can have people follow along with you. And it's not really like a presentation where you're sharing something that's new or that is like cutting edge in research or someone's coming to give a talk on, but you want to really go into the details of a method in scientific computing. And for this, we think like we would plan to have a separate in-depth series meetings where maybe if you wanted to talk about the details of the finite element method, if you wanted to share that with others, then we would set up these separate meeting times for that. And I think that goes along with, who would want to do that? Maybe the best way to learn something is to teach it, right? So, yeah. And then, so the rules for the workshops follow pretty similarly with the rules for, or they kind of rhyme with the rules from the projects. So anybody in the club can propose a workshop or presentation or in-depth series, any of these things. An active member can propose, and then it would be sent to us, and we would consider it, and then we would schedule it based on how many of these workshops we're getting. And but then a few other requirements or a few other things about it is that we plan to invite professors and other experts to give workshops, presentations, and then also we just want to make sure that the material of it is going to be understandable to the target audience. So this can be as simple as you specifying the target audience to us, saying, this workshop's really suited towards graduate students who have completed, have a basic understanding of this subject. and that's okay, and we can advertise that in the meeting. So this is going to be like a more complex topic, but we just ask that whatever target audience you give us, that the material in the workshop be suited towards that. Also have some examples for the workshop. And so CMake is something that's used a lot in scientific computing. So maybe you just give a brief tutorial about how to set up CMake for a project. There's a lot of different configurations you can do for that. And then Git is another thing that, especially if we're using GitHub for our projects, would be very important to know. So maybe just a brief tutorial on how to use the basic functions of Git, like a Git workflow, or maybe you want to give a presentation on your research. These are all examples of what you might do. And then similarly, because we want you guys to give us some presentations or workshops for the meetings we plan to have in the semester, we're going to show you the basic process of what you're going to do. So first, have an idea for a workshop, and then there's a special form you can fill out to sort of put your name on the list for who's going to go next. And then your workshop or presentation is approved by us, and then we'll give you a date of when we expect you to give this presentation or workshop. And that's just because, like we said, there's going to be if there's 5 people waiting and you submit one, it'll probably be a while. And if we expect that we get a lot, or if we get a lot of presentations or people interested in this, then we will probably increase the frequency of our meetings. But until then, it'll be once a month. So getting closer to the meeting that you'll be presenting will confirm your availability or preparedness. So we'll ask for your slides and make sure that you can present that day, and then we'll host a workshop or presentation, whichever you decide. Okay, and then competition. So this falls under the events category. We plan to have events within our own organization, such as like just get-togethers and stuff like that. But I think one of the main aspects of the events is the competition. So something that are really rewarding, I would say, are these external hackathons or like data challenges where you can get together as a team and compete against other teams just to show or improve your skill in how scientific computing essentially. So we wanted to set up a structure because sometimes it could be hard to find other people to do this with you. So we wanted to set up a structure to where that would become easier. If you're interested in a hackathon and you know of one, but you're having a hard time finding teammates, we wanted, this is going to be the structure for you. So what we do, the plan that we have is that you would come to us and be like, we want to make this team for a hackathon. And we would say, okay, perfect. You can advertise it in the meeting, and then others could come join you. And the thing is, whoever would propose it or whoever would say like, I want to make this team, they would become the team captain, and then they could like recruit whoever they wanted to their team. And so that's pretty much the gist of it. And then also a lot of these competitions require some sort of, initial fee to enter it. And then we could also, provide means of funding your competition team. So some of the other rules here is that the team captain does not have to participate in the competition. So if you want to organize a team, but perhaps maybe you're not eligible, you could still be the team captain. Pick organize the people that you want to be in there, but still be on the team. Yeah, and then similar to project, team captains can advertise the competition and see if anyone else is interested in participating. And that's mostly it. And at the end of this presentation, Tim is going to advertise a competition. So yeah. And then so one of the last of the 4 things I mentioned was community. And so we want to, so obviously we have a lot of things planned for as far as what we're going to do, but as a club, it's also going to be inherently a community for people to come together who are interested in scientific computing. So we plan to have some small social events, and then we also are planning to have this sort of like support forum, similar to like a Slack Overflow or Stack Overflow, or like any other like chat forum where you can post a question and hopefully someone else answers. We plan to set up one of those, and then there's also room for collaboration meetings where you can just get together with others in the club and sort of like work on whatever problem, if it's a club project or if it's an external project or something like that. Those are the main points of community. So yeah, I just want to say this is the main part of the presentation. That's what we do. But I also figured I'd include some supplemental slides in here just to give you an idea about how the club is organized and stuff like that. So this is just showing sort of club organization of how everyone's organized. So we have the membership, and there's to become a member, you just have to sign up for email us or attend a club meeting, and then inside of our membership we have an executive committee, and then we have several task committees. So the executive committee is like the president and the vice president, officers like that, and then is also composed of committee chairs, and then the committee chairs will be like the heads of their separate committees, which are responsible for sort of completing various aspects or various tasks in the club. So here are the task committees we have. We have the project committee, which is responsible for dealing with things, projects, workshops. Event and social committee is going to be related to planning, whatever social events we have, and then also related to competition teams. And then we have a website committee and an outreach committee. And these kind of, their names imply what they're responsible for. So outreach is just like advertising meetings and getting more people aware of the club. And then website manages the website, along with other web related tasks. And then, yeah, we just want to say that a part of this is, if you want to be more involved, the committees need more people so that, well, they need members, I guess, in general, so that things that we want to implement for the club can be implemented well. And we just want to make you aware of the process for becoming a committee member. And it's simple. It's sort of not a voting system, but the chair of the committee would nominate a member, and then they would bring that to the executive committee to approve the nomination. So if you're interested in becoming a committee member, you can talk to a committee chair. And that's going to be it for this presentation. Here are a few resources if you're interested in any of the things that we talked about today. If you're already scan the QR code for joining the club, this just takes you to a Google form, which you may or may not have filled out already. And then we have a QR code for our website. And then if you want to see an example, we put together a brief example of a project proposal. If you're interested in creating a project, or if you want to submit a workshop ID, this QR code will take you to Google form. Yeah, if you've already scanned this QR code to join the club, you don't have to. If you're unsure, you can always just email us at sc2officers@umich.edu. And then also, if you want to submit a project proposal or want to form a competition team, or if you have any questions, just please feel free to email us. Yeah, other than that, that is it for this presentation. Tim, are you still thinking about doing that presentation?
Oh yeah, I'm here. I was just gonna share the slides I had for it.
All right, let me give you the permissions real quick, and then I'll let you go.
Super, thanks.
All right, should be good.
All right. Does that look okay?
I think so. It hasn't popped up on my screen. Yep, I got it.
Okay, cool. All right, cool. So like Jacob said, we're interested in sponsoring teams to go to different types of competitions, and there's a good competition coming up the first 5 days of February, and it's called the Mathematical Contest in Modeling / Interdisciplinary Contest in Modeling, and it's basically all the same question. There's 6 problems to choose from, organized into 2 groups, problems A through F. So the group of 3 students will choose a problem when it's released, and then you write up an essay with your solution, and then submit it over the weekend or after the weekend. And let's go to the next slide. There's some more details. Yeah, so we're looking for 3 undergraduates that want to participate in this competition. If you're interested, you can just email me directly or email the email that Jacob had up a few minutes ago and inquire about participating in this competition. There's going to be a registration fee covered by the club, and as I said, those problems are going to be released on February 1st at 5 p.m. And then we'll work on the problems over the weekend and submit them the following Monday. That's pretty much it. Thanks, Jacob.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so yeah, that's the end of this informational. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out to that email. And with that, thank you. Yeah, and we'll see you around.
Thanks, Jacob.
Yeah, bye.